Hello everyone, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. This is our weekly Building Public live stream where we try to show you how to work with us on Shardeum, how you can contribute, how you can collaborate with us. The things that we are going to do on the stream is different every week. If you go to the events tab on Discord, you should be able to see a couple of the events that we've scheduled that is coming up in the coming weeks. Today, hang on, let me start recording before we dive into it. Okay, I am already recording. Fantastic. I'm going to share my screen so that we dive into what we have this week. This week, we want to dive into the Shardeum JSON RPC server. We can get it working. If we can't get it working, then we will look into the code base, try to make sense of how the code works. And if we have time, we can try to see if we can connect it with a locally running Shardeum network. And that sounds like a lot, so I'm going to get started and see how far we can come. This is also an opportunity. Usually something that I try to do when I'm doing a demo like this is to identify areas for you to contribute to Shardeum, because when we are currently building Shardeum to be the first auto-scaling blockchain out there, and we want you to be part of that journey. The one way that you can do that is to contribute to Shardeum in your own little ways. While we're doing this demo today, I'm hoping that you find areas that you can contribute, or if things are not working, you take notes of the things that are not working so that you can maybe file an issue or send us a pull request. If the documentations are not in order, that's also an area that I would expect someone to help us and chime in. So I'm going to grab this out of view. What I want to do is go to Shardeum and go to the JSON RPC server. Okay, so this is the Shardeum JSON RPC server. It's open source, anyone can access it. If you can't access it, go to this link. Let me drop it in the chat. You should be able to see the link in the chat now. So what do we want to do? We want to run this locally. Let's try to do that. So this is GitHub, so I'm just going to do I want to make a new directory. Let's call it BIP, and then I'm going to get into BIP and let's do a clone. So I'm going to do this following the current documentation. So let's come all the way down to installing the project. It says to do a git clone, which I've just done, and then change directory into the Shardeum JSON RPC. So let's do that. Okay, one thing that I'm noticing right now is that the project is JSON RPC server and not Shardeum JSON RPC as we saw on the repo. So if you're here and you're taking notes, this is a good place to contribute, right? Because you see that the documentation is a little different from the actual experience that we're getting now, which means if I do cd, it has to be JSON RPC server, right? And that's not what we currently have documented. We have Shardeum JSON RPC. So that's a good area for someone to contribute. And then we have git switch dev, but we are already in dev, so we are going to skip that command, so we don't have to switch into the dev branch since we are currently there. And then the next thing the documentation says to do is to do npm install. So let's do that, see if it works. Npm install. Two areas that we found out now that can be improved on the docs, right? We don't need to switch to dev branch if we are on it by default. And then the npm install command is also failing. I think this might be too small, so let me zoom into it a bit so that it's clearer for people watching on. Okay, so something is lacking. It's not seeing the node GYP. So let's do, first of all, nvm use. Shardeum strictly uses node 18, so any other version will just throw a bunch of errors. Let me actually see. Okay, nvm 18.16.1. So this is the current, this is the required version for anyone who's trying to work locally on Shardeum to use, is the version 18.16.1. So let me install node GYP. I have a feeling that's what is failing here. That's why this we are getting errors with our installs. So let's do install node GYP. And when that is done, if it goes successfully, then we can npm install the entire dependencies for the JSON RPC server. While that is going on, let me quickly check what else we are supposed to do. So there are two ways to run the JSON RPC server. If you're using Docker, you can follow the Docker instructions. I think you can see some of it here. But we are running it locally on my local machine, so I'm not using Docker, so I will ignore all of the Docker instructions on the docs. So when the installation completes, the next thing that I want to do is npm run start, which should ideally start the JSON RPC server for me, right? So let's see what we got. Looks like node GYP is installed, so let's do npm install again. This installation should then work, right? The only issue we had before is that it required node GYP to be installed first before installing the other dependencies. Again, that is an area for improvement on the docs for people who are keen on contributing and helping us build Shardeum. Okay, so now we have our dependencies installed. The next thing we want to do is npm start, which is what the doc said. So let's do npm start to start the JSON RPC server. And fingers crossed, let's see what we get. It's not working. Failed to fetch data from the archiver. Okay, so let's open this up in VS Code, and I'm going to make this full screen. The reason why I know where this error is because I've run into it a couple of times before. What is going on is, for the JSON RPC server to start, it needs to be able to connect to an archiver, either on a live network or a locally running network. And the way you set up that configuration to connect the RPC server to an archiver is to check the configuration you have in archiver config.json file. So as you can see, it's currently pointing to my local network, my local host, basically. But I don't have a local Shardeum network running at the moment, which means it's not going to find any archiver there. So what we can do is we can point it to a live archiver network, right? Let me grab an IP for that. Actually, I'm going to grab the whole config. So maybe we will come back and use this later when we have like a Shardeum network running locally. This would work exactly fine. But right now, for me to be able to test out the archiver, I need for me to be able to test out the JSON RPC server, I need this to use this IP. Yes, sorry about that. So this IP, this port, and this public key should give me access to an archiver server on the live network. So then I'm going to try to run it again, see what we get. Okay, there we go. So now we have a locally running Shardeum JSON RPC server, which means we can do some fun things like, for instance, I'm going to connect my MetaMask to this RPC server. So here I've got different accounts on my MetaMask wallet. So what you can do is come here, click add a network, add the network manually. It's called Shardeum Sphinx, I think. Let me Google that real quick. Add Shardeum to MetaMask. Yeah, I think there's documentation for how to do that. Shardeum network details. So the network name should be this. So let's grab that, put it here. I already have this set up actually. Let me make it $X so that it doesn't confuse it with the existing one I have. The new RPC URL is this, but this is for the live network. So right now my RPC server is running on localhost 8080, which is where I want to point to. So let's do right. That's going to be my new RPC URL. The chain ID is 8082. Again, if you want to find out how I'm getting these values, you can just look at the logs. So you can see that when the JSON RPC server started, it said is listening on port 8080, which is where I know that's where the RPC URL is, and the chain ID is 8082. So I'm not making up the numbers, I'm just doing what it's supposed to be. The currency is SHM, and the block explorer, you can leave that empty since it's optional. So I'm just going to save. Network is added successfully, switch to it. So I will switch to that network. Let's see if it connects. It might be conflicting because I already have like a Shardeum Sphinx network currently on my MetaMask. So yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen, but let's see. Let me see if I get anything in the logs. Okay, so it is connected. So these are all the accounts that I have in my MetaMask on the Shardeum network. And let me just show you all of those accounts so that you see them as well. So I've got like 9 different accounts. These are all the accounts that I'm seeing in my JSON RPC logs at the moment. So we've set it up locally. We've connected it to MetaMask. Something else that we can do is let's look at the code base a little bit, right? If you come to the src directory, if you look at the, first of all, let's look at the package.json file and see the start script. It runs our server.js, which is this server.ts file. Just gonna get this out of the way. Yeah, this is where we get all the logs when our RPC server is running. If you look at it here, you see it's listening on ports 8080 and chain ID is 8082, which is exactly what we saw in the logs. But then you see a couple of things is going on here. It's going to update the edge node config, set intervals, extend the server. This one we added recently because we want to be able to import this server.ts file into our test files. And then when it kicks off the server, it sets up the database, sets up some login events, subscriptions, a couple of things. So I don't think there's much to be confused about in this file, but I want to get over to the files where I feel like you're probably going to spend more of your time if you're looking to contribute, which is a couple of them. But one of them is the api.ts file, which is where we have all our Ethereum endpoints. So let me look for ETH_get balance. Yeah, so if you look here, we have all these Ethereum endpoints. The get balance one is particularly interesting because that's usually the one that everyone who's trying to test just goes to it first. So let's look at what's going on here, and this is going to also help kind of like expose or explore how the code base works, like how the files interact with each other. This is also what I did when I was trying to onboard on this code base and just really understand it myself. So a couple of things happens. It just sets some variables, increments this counter instance. It's going to declare an address and a block number. It's going to check if the address is valid. If it's not valid, it will emit some events. It will send some callbacks telling you that it's invalid address. If it is valid, it's going to grab the block number and initialize a balance variable. Then to get the balance, it's going to go to the service validator and execute the get balance function in the service validator. So now at least we're starting to see how the files work with each other. So let's look at service validator and see if we can find the get balance on it. Service validator is inside the external folder and service validator.ts. And see, we have a couple of different functions here. We have the get contract code. I'm going to minimize that. We have the get account. We have get balance, which is the one we're looking for, right? So we have a couple of different functions here that's basically just about validating an account, validating an address, validating a transaction, validating a code, just making sure that it's valid before it sends it back to the API.ts file. And then a couple of things happen here. It checks the configurations, logs things to the console, performs this .get account. So it's basically going to first get the account when you pass the account and pass the block number. And let's look at get account. This, I suppose, is going to be a utility function that we are, getting from a different file. So let's look at get account. Okay, it's this one. Actually, it's the account is the function right before it, so it's not a different utility file. So you get the account before you get the balance of the account. That makes sense. And when we do get that account, we simply return it. Otherwise, we return 0. So this kind of just gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the JSON RPC code base and how the files are talking to each other, which is interesting because if you wanted to contribute, it could be from any part of this code base. Something that I noticed while I was looking at it earlier is that the valid address is coming from, I think it's a web3.js package. I can't quite remember exactly the package where we're getting it from, but let me see. I should be able to find it here. Yes, Shardeum JS utility package. So this is where we're getting it from. And yeah, I had a little concern with it because if you pass a dummy string of numbers that meets a certain threshold in terms of length, then it will tell you that that is a valid Ethereum address, when it actually isn't. So again, that could be something that anyone on here could look at, try to validate it a bit more, because if I copy, for instance, I'm going to show you an example, although I won't test it right away, but I will show you an example. So let's say that I remove the last 3 digits of this account and I put ABC, right? That is not a valid address, but if I run it against the JSON RPC server, it's not going to catch that it's a dummy text that I've put there. You see, so I still get a result back telling me that you have 0 you have nothing in this account, but ideally what I would expect is that it will say, hey, this is not a valid Ethereum address or something like that. So again, that could be an area of contribution for someone who's interested in helping us build Shardeum. And that also brings me to probably the last thing that I want to show you today. Once you have the JSON RPC server running locally like this, you can interact with the API functions that we have. For instance, this is the get balance one that we just looked at in the code base. Where is it? Hang on. Damn it. This code base is huge, so getting to files or functions is usually challenging. So I just use the search and it gets me where I need to be. Yeah, so this function basically is what we just interacted with, basically passing it some wallet address and some other configurations, and then it gives us the value of that account. You can also basically interact with any other function here. I think we've got get gas price, get storage, get transaction by hash, get block transaction. Yeah, just there's tons and tons and tons of these Ethereum methods that you can interact with how you see fit, and we can query them by code or via Postman or however you would like to test them. What I want to do now, fingers crossed, hopefully, is that I'm going to try to see if I can connect this JSON RPC server to a locally running Shardeum network. So I'm going to stop this for now, and then I have my, I'm gonna grab this code base here. So this is my Shardeum code base. So what I'm going to do is try to start a local network. Shardeum start 10. Great. Looks like I have my archive server running. I have a monitor server running on 3000, and I have 10 validator nodes in this network. Let me just confirm that. That is supposed to be online. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to stop it and remove all the instances. I don't know if my logs is big enough that you all can see it. I'm going to clear. Yeah, so we have a clean slate, and I'm going to go all the way back to, I'm going to run this. So basically I'm stopping the network, removing the instances folder, and running the clean script. Then let me try to start 10 again. Should you start 10? That's the, I think we have a previous session where we walked through how to, set up this code base locally as well, how to, run a couple of different commands for a couple of different, depending on the amount of nodes you want to have in the network. You can, schedule start 20 for 20 nodes, schedule start 10 for 10 nodes, and things like that. Okay, again, I've done schedule start 10. So I get one archive server, I get one monitor server, and 10 validators in the network. Let me try this again, see if it's running. It is running. Fantastic, look at that. Cool. Now, the thing that I want to do is, as opposed to pointing my JSON RPC server to a live, active archive server that is deployed via that IP that I shared with you earlier, I'm going to try to see if I can point it to the local network, which is on 127.0.0 right? Let's save that. I'm going to use the integrated terminal now. Let's do npm start. Yeah, this should now point to, look at that. So now we have a JSON RPC server that is running locally, that is connected to the Shardeum network that is also running locally, which gives us a perfect dev environment to contribute, because the changes you make will reflect in all the right places. So this is what I have prepared for us today. This is what I wanted to share. I hope it's been helpful to someone who's trying to, get into helping us build Shardeum. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that I can see where Discord is. I don't even know the screen where I have Discord running. But other than that, I'm going to, let me see. There are no questions in the chat. Okay, next week. So thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you then again. Bye, everyone.